Hey everyone, and welcome to my bedroom. I never really have like a fancy background to my videos per se, but I've never filmed from in my bed. But I have just had a baby, which I am also currently trying to soothe right now. So if you hear little squeaks and adorable sounds, they're coming from him. I'll show you a little clip of him in a second. But anyway, I've just had a baby. I want to share my birth story with you all, especially if you've been following any of my other videos. I've given like a weekly or a bi-weekly update this whole pregnancy. So I'm really excited to share with you this super wild story of his birth. And if you're interested in that, then just keep on watching. So this little love is Elliot Henry. And yeah, he's just chilling here next to me as I'm making this video, talking all about how he came into the world. But I love this swaddle. It is absolutely amazing. My friend passed it along to me secondhand, and it's been a lifesaver. It keeps him wrapped up tightly, just like he was used to being in the womb, and his arms are kept out of his face because he has no control of those right now, and he's constantly like hitting himself in the face. So yeah, this has been a lifesaver. I can link the brand below if anybody's interested in this specific swaddle. But yeah, he's super adorable, and whoop, we just love him. Okay, so Elliot's due date, or like the estimated date, was October 30th, and I really had it set in my head that he was coming as an October baby and that he was coming early. And then that day came and went, and I just had to be super patient and remind myself that, I mean, he was coming eventually, and that was okay. So I did get real impatient though towards the end. But anyway, he decided that November was a much better month for him to come, and he was born at 40 weeks and 4 days. And he just came into this world like a whirlwind. So I'm real excited to get into that story. First, though, I have to just recommend, because it completely shaped my entire birth, hypnobirthing. So whether you read the book or you take part in the course or do both, it is completely worth your time. It's worth the investment. It's really, really life-changing. So hypnobirthing is what's the word? Methodology or practice, or I don't know. I don't know what it's called. It's by Dr. Marie Mongan. And so if you get the book and just read through it a couple times even if you've got the time, it is completely just worthwhile and full of amazing information, and that would be great for you to do if you're pregnant. But if you can also take a part in a course, I would do that. So our course was offered through our birth center, and normally we would have gone in person, but due to COVID, we just did Zoom sessions. So you could probably find one in your area, or at least find something that's offered online that you could join. But our specific course was 5 weekly sessions, and each session was 3 hours. So it was 15 hours total of just the most incredible content. And yeah, I just keep saying it, but totally worth your time. The most basic summary that I can give you of what it is and how it impacted me is just that it is meant to reshape your mindset and overall like outlook on birth and the whole process, like labor, birth, postpartum, all of that. I had so many fears surrounding birth, and was honestly like petrified of it, and had been my whole life, and for a while didn't even know if I like wanted to have kids that way, at least. But anyway, finally got to the point where I was like, okay, we want to try to have kids biologically, and I'm just gonna have to suck it up and deal with this super traumatic event and just get through it like everybody else. But It really doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, birth hasn't been viewed that way for all of history. Like, I just kind of assumed that it had been. So both the book and the course do a really good job of just like covering the overarching history of birth and the way that people have thought about it in the past, the way that people have dealt with it in different time periods and cultures, and it's really interesting. So, anyway, the way that we typically view or hear about birth in today's modern society, especially in the Western world, I feel really sad about it because I think it's often painted as this like horrific, very traumatic process. And for some people it is. Like, I'm not saying there's not trauma associated with birth. There's definitely people who have those experiences, and I've just learned that it doesn't actually have to be that way for every single person. This course definitely helped me to release a lot of those fears and then to retrain my mind around the whole process. And then it does so by giving you specific tactics that you can start putting into practice even before you go into labor, and that will completely benefit you once the real thing comes. So it goes into not only breathing techniques but also like affirmations and meditation and like relaxation practices, really just focused on your mindset, because as with anything in life, if you are afraid of something, then your body naturally like tenses up. And if you tense up, especially during birth, then you're going to experience a lot more pain because it's just like the natural reaction. Your mind is working against your body. Your body is naturally trying to do this process that it was designed to do. But if your mindset is working against you, then it's going to be much harder and much more painful and all of that. So, anyway, the goal is to release those fears, to release that tension, and to just have your mind and your body working together. And you will be able to have a much smoother, more gentle birth. And for me, at least, that is definitely the case. That was a very long intro, but I will get into our actual birth story now. But if you're pregnant, you've got to check out hypnobirthing. And I will stop talking about that now. So like I said, Elliot came at 40 weeks and 4 days. The couple days prior to that, I think just like 2 days prior, we were just barely over his due date, but I started to get this sense that it was going to happen soon. And I couldn't tell if it was just me being really hopeful because he hadn't come early, he hadn't come on the date, and I think I was partly very hopeful. But I think in another sense, I was definitely sensing that things were changing and that my body was getting ready for labor. The night before, I had started having surges, which is like just another word for contractions. That's another thing in hypnobirthing, is like reframing a lot of your mindset. Also includes changing some of the language that we use. So contractions can be kind of a scary word for a lot of people, and so they offer like a few alternatives that don't quite sound so scary. So like you could call them waves or surges or whatever. So anyway, the night before, I had started having some small surges, but I didn't even really understand that that's what was happening. I had felt a lot of like cramping, kind of just like period cramping is what it felt like for a week or two leading up to that. So I just thought it was that feeling a little bit more intense. It wasn't to the point where I could really recognize like, oh, this is a surge and I can time it, and then I can recognize that my body has like, a break in between and then another one starts, and so I'll time that one. It hadn't gotten to that point yet. So, but they had started the night before. And then that morning I woke up like feeling overall a lot better. But then as the morning progressed, I think by like 9 a.m., maybe even a little bit earlier than that, I finally realized that I was feeling this way for specific intervals and that I could actually time them, which was the first that had happened. So I got real excited about it because I was like, okay, I think this means that we're, really going somewhere. And So I got out this app and just started timing whenever I could feel this surge coming on. And I mean, I've never had this before, so I was just kind of going with my gut, and it basically was like as soon as I started to feel some cramping, I would start the timer, and then when it seemed to go away, I would stop the timer. And that's how the morning went. And then as it carried on, each surge became more and more defined, and it was very clear, like, okay, this is my body contracting and not just like a cramping feeling. So I got very excited about that, and I was happy to be feeling excited because that was something I had worked on so hard in this whole hypnobirthing course, and all the preparation, like after the course ended, then all the weeks still leading up to the birth, I just constantly worked on these mindsets. And one of the affirmations I really focused on for myself was that I am not afraid to give birth. That was one of them. And then I am excited to meet my baby was another one. And so when that day came and these surges started happening, I was truly very excited about it and filled with a lot of joy and expectation and not really fear. So it also helped that I didn't start thinking ahead. Like, I didn't start focusing on what was coming. Even though I had been very well educated about this whole process by now, I just focused on the moment that I was in and the surge that I was in, and just like getting through one moment at a time. And for me, that helped, because if I tend to look too far into the future in anything in life, I can get very overwhelmed and then anxious, and then that would be working against everything I had tried to prepare for with this birth. So as I could continue timing those surges, I just went throughout my day as normally as I could, and just kept on timing them. And Kevin was at work, so I kept him in the loop that that was happening. And then I also texted my doula, who's just like a birth support person who was going to be with me when that time came. So I texted her to let her know that that was happening. And yeah, just like went about my morning. And by the way, the surges, I should mention, I would not call them painful. I didn't feel like it was pain. It was just like, I mean, I don't know. It started out feeling kind of like cramping, like period cramps, like I mentioned earlier. But then as things progressed, it changed from that feeling to more just like, sort of just like this intense wave of energy, like going through my body, and it would hit its peak and then it would resolve. And to me, it was very manageable, and each time a surge came, like, I knew what to do to get through it, with the different like breathing techniques that I had learned, and even just like affirmations I could tell myself, or listening to some specific like relaxation tracks. I just kind of went throughout my day normally, but also really focused on putting those skills into use with each surge, and it definitely helped to manage my mindset, which I think managed the pain levels. So I wouldn't personally call them painful. So anyway, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to go for a long walk, just because I honestly wanted to keep things going and I didn't want anything to stall out. So I took my dog on a really long walk. I think I went for like 45 minutes, just all around the neighborhood and trails and stuff, and tried to make sure I was walking uphill a lot. And so went on that walk and then got back home. And then as soon as I got home, I went to the bathroom, and then I didn't know this before getting pregnant, so I don't know if I'm like the only one who was just completely unaware, but there are a lot of things that come out of your body when you're pregnant, and especially when you're about to give birth. And one of those things is very grossly named the mucus plug. I think it's gross. In hypnobirthing, they've renamed it the uterine seal, which I like much better. I mean, because that's exactly what it is. Like, it's just sealing off that part of your uterus to protect it from any kind of infection and whatnot. So, but you lose that, and the thing is, it's not quite like your water breaking, where you know that you're going to be going into labor if you haven't already, like really soon. You can lose your uterine seal anywhere from like hours to days to weeks before you're actually going into labor. So I knew I had already lost like part of it, maybe a week prior, but it apparently wasn't all of it. So after that really long walk, and with these surges coming like, you know, consistently, I definitely lost the rest of it when I went to the bathroom. And you know that you are getting like much closer to labor if it comes out and it's got like some blood in it. And so don't know what she's barking at. Anyway, hopefully if you chose to watch this and it is a birth story, you're expecting to hear all these kinds of details. So anyway, I lost that, and then because there was some of that blood in it, I knew that that was a sign that like I'm clearly in labor now. So I let Kevin know, I let my doula know. At that point, my doula told me that I should call the midwives and let them know, because that meant that like they would need to be prepared to help me pretty soon. Um, so anyway, I let them know, but again, it was still completely manageable on my own. And so I told Kevin like he could just finish out his day at work, and I felt comfortable with that. So after that happened, then I decided to just like lay down for a bit and listen to some relaxation tracks and just get like my mind really calm and prepared and all of that. Afterwards, I think I like watched a movie or something. So anyway, just kept myself very, very calm and in the right mindset, and it continued to benefit me. I didn't feel like these surges were becoming any more painful, even though they were becoming more and more regular, and the intensity was ramping up. When Kevin finally got home, I think it was at about like 5 o'clock at night or so, and I had just really worked to create like a calm mental space, but also like a calm physical space. And so I had like the lights low, and I had my diffuser going with some like calm, you know, lavender essential oils, and I was actually in the middle of writing a little letter to Elliot that maybe he'll read later in life. So I was just really like working on creating that atmosphere. So it was nice when Kevin got home and we could both just take some time to like connect and breathe, and just like get excited about this whole process together too. And so it was really nice. Like the whole evening we just spent just connecting with each other. We were able to have like some intimate time, and that also helps to either get labor going or keep it progressing. So we connected in that way. We watched a movie, and I just sat on like the birthing ball, or like a big yoga ball. So I sat on that while we were watching the movie, and kind of had it like in front of Kevin while he sat on the couch. And because at that point the surges were coming more regularly, I think they were like anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes apart or something like that. And the kind of like the golden rule that we were looking for was that they needed to be 5-1-1, which was like 5 minutes apart, lasting for a whole minute for 1 hour. So once that time period hit, or my water broke, we knew that like either of those two signals, it was probably going to be time to go to the birth center. So we weren't there yet, but by that point I was feeling a lot more of the like pressure in my back, so more like back labor. So sitting on the birthing ball really helped, and just kind of like going through still my own mental and breathing techniques while watching this movie. And anytime a surge would come, Kevin was able to press on like these pressure points on my back until the surge was over. And so that really, really helped as well, which also is great with the hypnobirthing course and the book. If your partner is involved, then they can learn all of these things with you. And Kevin felt so prepared to go into this birth with me, and he felt so prepared and calm in the moment too, the whole time, which was really great. So that was extremely supportive. That's kind of how the evening just progressed. And then after the movie was over, we figured, since, you know, we hadn't hit either of those two like marks yet, that we should just go to bed and, you know, try to get some rest, knowing that like I would definitely need that pretty soon. So we went to bed, and Kevin can fall asleep within like 10 seconds flat. And so he was out. But I definitely like could not sleep. I was just probably a combination of excited and then also like really mindful of the contractions or the surges and their timing. And I didn't want to like accidentally miss my window, even though I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to, because like you just can't really sleep through that. But I was kept up. So I ended up getting out of the bed and going to the couch and just like continuing to keep myself in this calm, relaxed state while timing these surges, and just kind of like hung out there for a couple hours. This is where it takes a wild turn. So, all the way up until this point, this has been like the whole day. Everything was insanely manageable, and I would say at that point pain free, because it just it wasn't pain to me. It was just kind of intensity that I worked through. But then sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning, my surges like just skipped over that whole 511 rule that we were waiting for. They went from being consistently 6 to 7 minutes apart to a minute and a half apart, just like that. I mean, within that hour, everything changed. And I was not expecting that. So all of a sudden, I was timing them and I was just very confused at first. I was like, is this actually happening? Am I like not doing this right, not timing it right? But no, they were coming at a minute and a half apart and lasting for longer than they had. So they were then lasting between like 50 seconds and just over a minute. So I knew at least in the 511 window that like if they're lasting for at least a minute and it's going on for an hour, then you need to go to the birth center. But they started coming at a minute and a half apart. And that's when I don't know if I like just lost my grounding a little bit because I was so taken aback by it, or if the pressure of those surges also just like really increased. But it became to a point where I didn't feel like I could manage it as well on my own anymore. So I felt like we needed to get to the birth center. So I got up and I like went to the bathroom, and then while I was like in the bathroom, another surge came, and this one was like so intense that like my body just started shaking, just kind of like tremoring, and it was uncontrollable. And I knew based on what I had read that that was a signal that I was in transition, which means that you're like going into that next stage of labor, which is preparing to have the baby. And so at that point, I had also, like, all the way through that day, I had been very calm and very quiet, just breathing through each surge, not even making, like, a noise. And by the time this point hit, I didn't expect myself to be vocal, but it was like I couldn't even control it. Like, all of a sudden, these, like, um, just these deep, like, gut sounds started coming out through each surge. So anyway, needless to say, Kevin woke up and he was great. He was just like wide awake, ready to get into action, and knew how to support me. So we called the midwife and called the doula. And the thing is, I was still able to talk through these surges. Not very well, not as calmly as I was before, but I was still able to talk through them, which made my midwife on the phone think that I wasn't actually like very far along, and that, you know, things were ramping up. Like, she didn't doubt the intensity of it, but she was like thinking we still had many hours to go, and, you know, wouldn't even be having this baby until like later the next day. So, or not the next day, because that was like 2 a.m. So later in that day. Um, but anyway, so she gave me the choice. She was like, I think you still have some time left, but if you feel like we should get to the birth center, then like it's your call. And I briefly considered waiting it out and kind of doubting myself, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not that bad yet, maybe I'll wait. But thankfully my gut was just like, no, override. We need to go. So we decided to head to the birth center. We told her that we would meet her and the doula there within like 45 minutes. And hung up. And then right after that, Kevin's starting to like take the bags that we had ready to go by the front door and load them into the car. Meanwhile, I then couldn't even get from the bathroom to the front door without having a surge, like a really intense surge, every minute. And so it was insanely intense. I ended up just like getting on the floor with like my arms over the birthing ball, and I just had to stay in that position with like every surge while Kevin was loading the car. And then my poor neighbors, I don't think that they heard anything. We haven't heard from them that they did. So hopefully I didn't wake anybody up in the middle of the night. But yeah, the door was propped open. He's trying to load the car, and meanwhile I was just like going through surge after surge with these like deep like groans coming out of my body. And then after a couple of those surges, all of a sudden my water breaks, and it's just like, I mean, like gushing out of me. And so yeah, it I wouldn't say I was scared. I don't think I was ever scared throughout the whole process. Hi. I'm talking to my computer. So I don't think I was ever scared through that whole process, but I definitely was recognizing the intensity of it. And so Kevin was trying to go back and forth between like loading the car and then coming and like putting pressure on those pressure points on my back and helping me through these like constant surges. So anyway, everything went way slower than we anticipated, and we did not get to the birth center within 45 minutes. It was actually like an hour and 15 minutes later. So my water has broken. I'm just like on the floor trying to get through this, and finally everything was loaded and Kevin was able to like help me get to the car. And then there was that car ride that was just like the most intense thing ever. I decided to sit because I had heard stories of people who had been like squatting in the car or in some other position, and it just made it a lot easier to like accidentally give birth in the car. And so I didn't want that to happen. So I was sitting in like a normal position, but I was experiencing the most intense pressure I've ever felt in my life. And I did not know at the time that that was because he was crowning. So I was literally like basically sitting on his head the entire drive, which was about a 25-minute drive. So I felt like this pressure was so intense. I honestly was like in my mind like, oh, I am going to poop in the car, and that's really embarrassing, and I didn't want that to happen. And so I was like trying to breathe the way that I had been taught to breathe and the way that I had been able to manage all day long, but it was way harder. And then I was trying to like listen to these affirmation tracks that Kevin had playing in the car. And then also at the same time, I'm like groaning from my very, very gut because the intensity was just so crazy. And not knowing all the while that the pressure I was feeling was because he was already crowning. So thankfully, we got through the whole drive and we got to the birth center later than we anticipated, but that gave the midwife and the doula time to like set up the whole room, thankfully, because by the time we got to the birth center, from the moment we parked the car to him being born was 27 minutes. We got there, the midwife and the doula came out right away, and they were able to help just like get me from the car into the room and everything. And then once we were in the room, the midwife realized what was going on with me. She was asking me like, "Are you pushing?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like, I've never gone through this, but I just know this is the most intense pressure I've ever felt, and I can't control like what I'm doing right now. Like, my body, its natural instincts kicked in, and I was pushing without really realizing it. It was just like involuntary. And I was trying to just like breathe through it the way I had been taught. So anyway, she's like, okay, we need to check you. So she gets down there and she checks, and immediately she's like, oh yeah, that's his head. You need to get into the tub, because she knew I wanted to have a water birth. She did offer, like, where I was standing, literally right there. She's like, if you want, you can just squat down right now and we can support you in having this baby, like right here. But the tub was literally just like steps away, and it was all ready to go, and I wanted the water birth. So they got me into the tub, and I just went into like an all fours position. It was just instinctively like what I felt I needed to do. So we tried a few like intentional pushes with each surge, now that I knew that he was crowning and that that's what was happening. And it was the craziest feeling. Like, I could feel his head starting to come out, and then the surge would end, and it was like the momentum was lost, and he'd like go back in. And so it was this crazy, motivating, and also frustrating feeling. Um, so after a couple of those surges, we decided to try a different position. So I tried to like get more onto my back with like my legs pulled up. More like the traditional position you would be in if you were in like a hospital bed, and that did not work for me. It was actually like, I felt like it was working against me, and I think that's the only point where I would actually use the word painful. So yeah, we got out of that position and back to all fours, because that was just working better. And then after maybe like 3 more really intense surges and like intentionally focusing on my breathing and pushing, his head was finally able to come out. And the cool thing about a water birth too, that I didn't know beforehand, before this course, was that because the baby is transitioning from the fluid within your body to this fluid, like in the water, and he's never used his lungs before, all of his oxygen was coming from me through the umbilical cord. It's totally fine for him to be born in the water and his head is just underwater for a while until you can like push the rest of him out, because he doesn't even know how to take a breath yet. So I thought that was pretty cool. But finally his head was out, and then at that point I was really confused, because all that pressure I had felt was like gone, but I wasn't feeling the same pressure with like the rest of his body in me. And so I was very confused about like, wait, what happened? Is he fully out? And but the midwife and the doula were like, all right, like, you've done it, like the head's out, so just give one more good push and like let's get the rest of this body out of there. So the next surge started, and I just like gave it everything I had, and the deepest like grunt or groan or whatever, and his body just came like shooting out like a torpedo. Like, he was just out, and then all of a sudden I'm like turning around, and the midwife has him pulling him up out of the water and then just like placed onto my chest. And it was the craziest moment to all of a sudden just be like holding this body, this little baby that had just been inside of me and had been growing inside of me for all this time. And all of a sudden I'm just like holding him. And the picture that's on the thumbnail for this video is like my favorite. I'm like staring right at Kevin, and you know, he and I are both just like tears in our eyes. Can't believe that just happened. It was an awesome moment. But I was also like kind of just processing it all, and he wasn't crying, because the other thing about babies born in the water is they're typically like, it's a much more gentle arrival into this world, and as he learns to take his first breath, it's just very calm, and he's not like screaming or crying or everything I had kind of seen in like the movies or whatever. And so I just kept asking over and over, like, is he okay? Is he okay? And when the midwife and doula were finally able to assure me, like, he's fine, everything's fine, you're done, then it just all kind of sank in. But then after that, it was still a whirlwind, because then I needed to get up out of the tub and onto the bed, and there's the whole like after birth situation. So you got to deliver the placenta, and there's all these other things that they have to do to like just make sure that your body is fully like emptied of everything that it needs to be. So the rest of that time just went by so quickly, and meanwhile I was just like holding the baby on my chest the whole time. And then babies are amazing. They start to like naturally kind of bob around, and they're like searching for your breast because they've got that instinct to like to latch on and to feed. So we spent a good like 2 hours probably just like laying in bed together. The midwife and the doula were able to help show me what to do, as Elliot was also learning what to do, and we just kind of learned together and started our whole like breastfeeding journey right away. But he was born at 4:36 in the morning. Like I said, the whole switch in my body had taken place somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. So that was insanely fast. And he was born within 27 minutes of arriving at the birth center. And yeah, it was super crazy. But I absolutely loved it and wouldn't have had it any other way. Because we were at a birth center, we also didn't need to stay overnight or anything. You know, they go through all of their typical procedures to make sure that like you're healthy, baby's healthy, everything's safe and good. But then we were able to go home. We were driving away by like 10:30 in the morning. So we were able to go home and spend the rest of that day just together. Well, and each day afterwards. But it was really special, and we came back the next day for like a 24-hour appointment just to check that everything was still good. And then since then, it's just been us at home. He's 9 days old, and I think that's all that I had to share with you, at least for this video. I'm planning on doing more videos. I'll go into one that talks about like sustainable postpartum care items that have been a lifesaver for me so far. Most of my videos, if you don't know already, are about like sustainable living in relation to this pregnancy. And so now it'll be like sustainable living with a baby and all that entails. So I'm excited to get into some new content to share with you guys and to share more of my little guy with you all as he grows. And I hope that this birth story was encouraging, if not just entertaining to you or interesting somewhat. If you are pregnant, again, I would definitely recommend Hypnobirthing, either just the book or the course with it. And if you've got any of your own birth stories to share, if you've had experience with hypnobirthing, I would love to hear about it. So feel free to leave that in the comments or message me. Oh, one other thing I would say is if you are preparing to give birth, watch a lot of these kinds of videos, and specifically look up like actual birth videos. Like if you can look up hypnobirthing videos or gentle birth videos on YouTube, then that was super powerful for Kevin and I to watch a lot of those, because it totally visually reshaped how we looked at birth as well. It got rid of all the negative images that you often see in the media, and it showed real life examples of like completely positive, gentle, natural births, and definitely gave us hope that we could have an experience like that. And even though towards that very end everything was way more intense than it had been up to that point, and I was like very loudly getting through that last part of my labor, it was still like almost completely pain-free. It was still really amazing. And yeah, the way my doula and midwife described it, they were like, you roared your baby out of you. And they were like, you are a birth goddess, like just roaring him into this world. And I don't know, I appreciate those terms, because then it didn't make me feel like I was just being like super loud. But however your baby comes into this world is amazing, and if they are happy and healthy, then that is what matters. But hopefully you feel encouraged that you can be empowered to have a natural and a gentle birth, and that it can go really, really positively for you and be full of joy. And even like last detail, I had 2 tears, but I didn't even need stitches for them. They like, it either just went so quickly or so smoothly that it wasn't even as big of a deal as it could have been. So that's all for now. I will stop rambling, but thanks for listening to my birth story with Elliot, and I look forward to sharing more videos with you in this whole postpartum and just new life as a parent kind of stage, and I'll connect more into sustainable living with the future videos. But hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys soon.